Hey peeps, what's up? Munchie here, back with another video. And if you've gotten the iPhone 14 Pro or the iPhone 14 Pro Max and you're looking for the camera settings, an explanation of the camera settings, what might be the best camera settings for you, what toggle should you enable, what toggle should you disable, all of those things are going to be covered in this video. So for starters, to access the camera settings on your iPhone 14 Pro or the iPhone 14 Pro Max, you need to go into settings. Once you are in settings, you need to scroll down and you will see the option for camera. So these are all the camera settings which are available to us. First up, we have formats. Now herein you will see camera capture. You have two different options. First one is high efficiency and then you have most compatible. Now high efficiency is Apple's own format, which is HEIF or HEVC. You can use this if you have the Apple ecosystem. You have an iPad, you have a MacBook, you have an Apple Watch, you have the iPhone. Transferring images between those, airdrop, all those things, this is the best one for you. Then you have most compatible. Now this you're going to use if you do not own the Apple ecosystem and you want pictures in JPEG or H.264. This is what you're going to use. Now super important thing is that because the walled garden wants you to stay within the walled garden, which is why if you are using most compatible or say JPEG, in that case you will not be able to use cinematic video, 4K 60 fps, and your slow motion of 1080p at 240 fps along with HDR video, because unfortunately they do require you to use the high efficiency mode. Next up, we have toggles for Apple Pro RAW for photo capture. Now do note the iPhone 14 Pro and the 14 Pro Max, the main sensor is 48 megapixel. That is your primary camera. So you can actually shoot 48 megapixel pictures on your iPhone 14 Pro or the 14 Pro Max once you enable the Pro RAW toggle and you set the Pro RAW resolution as 48 megapixels. Now do note this is a raw picture which is a 10-bit file using your linear DNG, and it retains more information about the picture. You have high dynamic range, but you should use this if you are going to edit the picture which you have taken in say Lightroom later on. That is when you should use your ProRAW, and again ProRAW pictures will take up more storage. Similarly for video capture you have Apple's ProRes. Now this again is a 10-bit HDR video with maximum details, high dynamic range, and you should again use this if you are going to edit your video later on in a video editing software like say iMovie, or you're going to use DaVinci. So once you enable these toggles and you go back to the camera application, here it is in the photo mode. On the top right you will see the raw option. So either you can enable your raw picture or you can disable your raw pictures. Similarly, if you go into the video mode, on the top left you will see the option to enable or disable your ProRes, and once I enable ProRes you will see I'm getting the max time I can record is 56 minutes. Now this is at 1080p and 60 fps. If I do 4K 30, then the max time is 32 minutes. So do note that capturing photos in ProRAW and videos in ProRes is going to fill up your iPhone's storage pretty quickly. Then if we go back, we have the option of your record video. Now this is the default setting which you want in your camera application. So if you open the camera app, then go into video mode, the default will be 1080p or HD at 60 fps. If I change this to 4K at 24 and now I go into the camera application, go into video mode, by default it will be at 4K 24. So that is what we are changing over here. Now herein you will also notice that they do tell you how much storage it is going to take for a minute of video. Now then again, if you are in bright lights, then you can use 4K 30 fps. If you are in low light, use 4K 60 fps. And if you want your movie style Hollywood style video, then you use 4K at 24 fps. Then you will see another toggle for show PAL formats. Once you enable this, you will see we have a new option of 1080p at 25 fps, and similarly you should have 4K at 25 fps as well. So this again, certain countries, your lights around you are running at 50 hertz, and when you try to shoot a picture or capture video, then you have vertical lines going across or horizontal lines. So to fix that, either you use 24 fps or 30 fps, and if that doesn't fix, then you can always switch over to 25 fps as well. And those countries are in Europe, Africa, Asia, and South America. Next up, we have enhanced stabilization. Now, what does enhanced stabilization do? Let us say you are capturing video on your iPhone 14 Pro or the 14 Pro Max. Most of the times you're using it handheld, so your hand generally shakes. So once you enable this enhanced stabilization, it is going to crop into the frame a little bit and then get rid of that shakiness. So if you're using your handheld iPhone 14 Pro for video recording, then enable this toggle. However, if you're using a tripod or say a gimbal for stabilization, then you can always disable this toggle so that you get the full frame. Next up, you have action mode low light toggle. So this is going to decrease the stabilization to optimize for a less brighter scene. So let us say you are in a situation wherein you're using action mode but the light is low. That is when you're going to enable this toggle. Then you have HDR video for high efficiency, again high dynamic range. You can capture 10-bit video, and this also includes your Dolby Vision. Then you have auto FPS. So this is used to reduce the frame rate to 24 fps to improve low light video, and then it automatically also switches between 30 and 60 based on how much light you have. I generally leave it at auto for 30 and 60 fps. Then you have lock camera. So if you do not want the lenses to switch when you're recording video, then you can use this toggle of lock camera. Then you have the option of record slow-mo and record cinematic. So herein you can configure whether you want your slow motion video to record at 240 fps or you want it to record at 120. Similarly, you have the option for cinematic. You want 1080p at 30, 4K 24 or 4K 30 fps. This is the default setting. You can obviously change it when you are in the camera mode. Then you have record stereo sound. So this I generally leave it as enabled because this is going to record your sound which you're recording from the iPhone 14 Pro in dual channels. Then you have preserve settings. So I'm not sure whether you noticed it or not, but if the camera app is killed in the background and you open it one more time, by default it opens up in camera mode. If you do not want that, so let us say you were in video mode and you want it to open back in video mode instead of camera mode, so this is the toggle you are going to enable. Basically this is preserving your last setting or the last mode which you used in the camera application. Next up, we have set volume up for burst. So by default, if I open the camera application and I press volume up, it is going to start recording a video. However, if you do not want this, then you go back and you enable this use volume up for burst. And now if I go into the camera application, press volume up, it is taking up burst pictures right here. So another nifty feature for those of you who want to take burst shots from your iPhone 14 Pro or the 14 Pro Max. Then we have toggles for scan QR code and show detected text. So this you are going to use in case you want to scan any QR code using the camera app, and similarly you can also show detected text using the camera app on your iPhone 14 Pro or the 14 Pro Max. Then you have a toggle for grid. Now I do recommend that you enable this toggle because here it is without that option enabled. I do not see any grid option. But if I go back into the settings and enable the grid, now if I go back into the camera, here it is. I do have a grid, and this grid will be visible in your video and in your photographic mode as well. And you can use this to center an object when you are taking a picture. So Also, those of you who like to center objects in the frame, do enable your grid. Similarly, you have toggles for mirror front camera. Now, whenever you take a selfie, something which is on your right, it appears on left on the picture. You do not like that, you enable this toggle of mirror the front camera on your iPhone 14 Pro or the 14 Pro Max. Then we have a toggle for view outside the frame. So by default, if you are in photo mode and this is my frame, you will see I have a black area around the frame. I cannot see what is outside of that. In case you do not like that and you want to see what is outside the frame, you enable this toggle, and now if I go back to the camera application, you should notice that I am able to see what is outside the frame. Do note, whatever you see in the frame is going to be captured. It's not that if you enable view outside the frame, then the contents outside the frame will be captured. Then you have photographic styles. Now this is something which Apple added, I think, last year. This is for those of you who do not like a specific tone. So this is your default. You have your tone as 0 and warmth as 0. In case you want rich contrast wherein tone is -50 and warmth is 0, you can do that. Similarly, you have a vibrant style and you also have a warm style. So based on your personal preference, you can choose whatever photographic style you want to. Then we have prioritize faster shooting. Once you enable this toggle and you are taking pictures rapidly by pressing the shutter, the iPhone 14 Pro or the 14 Pro Max is going to intelligently adapt the picture quality. Then you have lens correction. So this is to correct the lens distortion on the front and the ultra wide camera. Then we have macro control. Now once you enable this toggle and you go into the camera application, on the bottom right you will see an option to enable or disable the macro lens. So if you are into macro photography and you want to take macro pictures, want full control as to when the macro lens kicks in and when you can take macro pictures from your iPhone 14 Pro or the iPhone 14 Pro Max, then this is the toggle which you need to enable. And last but not the least, we have some setting for night mode, which is not present in your camera settings in settings. So if I go into the camera application, I am in photo mode. On the top, you will notice it is telling me 1 second. So this is my picture, which is going to be taken in night mode. However, once you are in night mode and you tap on this arrow and tap on night mode moon over here, you can change the maximum seconds. So as it gets darker, I should be able to use this slider and you can see it is at max 30 seconds. Now do note, this max 30 seconds is going to appear if your phone is super stable. That is, if it is on a gimbal or it is on a tripod. If you are holding it in your hand in a dark situation, then the maximum you might get is 10 seconds. And of course, this is going to be super useful in astrophotography pictures wherein you take picture of the moon or the stars or the constellations. And there it is, peeps. Those are the iPhone 14 Pro or the iPhone 14 Pro Max camera settings explained along with what each toggle does. And now you should be smart enough, intelligent enough to choose the best camera setting for your iPhone 14 Pro or the iPhone 14 Pro Max.